My name is Karol Balfe and I coordinate Amnesty International's mental health campaign, and I'm just going to very briefly speak about the process that's been underway in Ireland by civil society organisations. Some of you will be aware that in Ireland we have very archaic legislation from 1871 on capacity, and the government has long known that it needs to update this legislation, and in 2008 heads of bill were published based on some work around what we've heard this morning on the functional approach from our Law Reform Commission. And at the time that was quite good work, but there were some concerns from civil society that things have moved on. The convention was obviously adopted and signed by Ireland at that stage, and we needed to get it right and look at that. And in August last year, the Justice Committee invited submissions on the capacity legislation. And Amnesty and the Centre for Disability Law and Policy, through Jared and Eleanor, came together with about 15 different organisations, representing a whole range of organisations, from mental health, intellectual disability, older people, people with acquired brain injuries, a whole selection of organisations, but organisations who shared a collective frustration with not having capacity legislation and a very strong desire to get it right and to make sure that our capacity legislation was in line with the Convention. And I think what's really interesting to note in Ireland as well, that we had a new government last year and they made quite a strong commitment in their programme for government where they actually said they wanted to introduce capacity legislation in line with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So one would hope we're starting from a good place with that strong government commitment. In terms of the process, we have worked together as a group of organisations, and there's been quite a strong level of commitment from the organisations. 15 organisations and some individuals have met on a monthly basis since August of last year and came together for a very long, comprehensive process to draw out what we want in this legislation and what it should look like. Eleanor is going to talk about the principles and some of the things that we're looking for within the principles, but I'm just going to talk around what we have done with those principles. And as well as meeting once a month, we held two quite large seminars looking at the issue of legal capacity. And in the first one, we brought over Oliver Lewis from the Mental Disability Advocacy Centre, and we heard from a range of people with direct experience about what they want. Somebody with a mental health problem talking about advanced care directives and the difference that that would have made. Somebody with an intellectual disability talking about independent living. An advocate for an older person talking about how he really knew what that woman wanted in terms of her will and preferences and the difficulty he had in terms of supporting her. We had a second seminar looking at the international best practice and using some of the work that we've heard this morning from Michael Back and Lana Kersner. And Lana came with a number of other international experts to outline different jurisdictions and what Ireland could adopt and to make very clear recommendations for the government process. The other thing that we have been doing is working with professionals in this area who in many cases will be the people who are on the ground dealing with these issues. And we've been working with bodies like the College of Psychiatry in Ireland, the Psychiatric Nurses Association, the psychologists, bringing our principles to them for a discussion and debate about how it might work in practice. And you've heard also from Maria this morning about how the National Federation are using the principles as a basis for discussion with their members. In terms of Ireland, just to very briefly give you a sense of some of the issues and I suppose some of the progress and impact that we've had as a group working together. One of the big things that has happened since the bill was published is that we know there is a very clear commitment from the government to include a provision around supported decision making. And this is hugely welcome and something that the NGOs are very much supportive of. We also know recently there was some debate around advanced care directives and how they would support the Convention, and that there is a commitment from the Minister for Health that those advanced directives would be considered as part of the capacity legislation. We also know there's a commitment for principles that are in line with the Convention. However, unfortunately, there are many issues of concern for us with the capacity legislation. And one of them is that the courts is going to be used as the main mechanism for decision-making disputes in Ireland. And anybody who's familiar with our court system knows that it is very overburdened and that it is not trained in a specialist way to support people with the type of issues we're talking about here. Another big area of concern is that the government is actually proposing to bring in guardianship under this new legislation at a time when we know that many states are being asked to review their guardianship law. So that's something of big concern to us. Another area is around best interests, and it was great to have the clarification from Michael because, and again, anybody who knows the Irish system will know how paternalistic it has been, and the way best interest is interpreted is in terms of best medical interest, with very little or in fact no emphasis on the person's will and preferences and what they would want. Another big concern for us, and this is particularly for us in Amnesty as part of our mental health campaign, is that there isn't a clear strategy for how capacity legislation will link up with the Mental Health Act, and it would be unacceptable in our view that people with mental health problems would be excluded from any support agreements that might be brought in. So that's just to give you a sense of the process of what we've done as a group, and that work is very much ongoing, and when the bill is finally published, which we believe will be in the next 2 weeks, we will be keeping a very close eye on it as well. So I'll hand over to Eleanor.
I'm Eleanor, for anyone who doesn't know me, and I work with the Centre for Disability Law and Policy here. And together with Amnesty